Ambassador Davis, thank you for joining us. I know your time is tight, so we'll just dive straight in.
Absolutely.
President Trump is visiting. What are your hopes for that trip?
Well, I think the trip happens at a really important time for the region, but certainly for Qatar as well. We've built such a robust and comprehensive bilateral relationship with Qatar that I think the president's trip punctuates the importance of all of our shared bilateral issues, peace and stability in the region, investment and commerce in both directions. And I think the president's trip, which is a first for a sitting president to Doha, gives an opportunity to highlight all of the ways in which the United States and Qatar have built an effective relationship that actually not only enhances the economies and the values of the two countries, but in the future will provide a platform for peace, mediation, and stability globally.
And it's a very different time, obviously. The last Trump administration, you're very familiar with that history. Everybody in Qatar remembers the blockade. You are very often speaking in public about misunderstandings about certain things about Qatar that happen in the United States. Everybody in this room doesn't have those misunderstandings.
Yep.
And in many ways, Qatar is a very natural ally of the United States, with Georgetown being here and the huge American military base. But what do you think the misunderstandings are? What can be done about them? And do you think President Trump's trip will help?
So I think it's right to call them misunderstandings.
Yeah.
Very often, incomplete information and ignorance about a country's view on the world and our relationship with them is seen as something nefarious or something sinister. I think that there's a responsibility for those who know Qatar, who have relationships with Qatar, and that includes the highest levels of the U.S. government, to tell the story. The Qataris have to be part of that, of course, but in fact, what we find is, in a lot of ways, our relationship in the United States to Qatar is just kind of beginning. We have a comprehensive understanding of a lot of our relationships in Europe, but in this region, in a region where, to be kind, in the past, the United States has treated the entire region like a monolith. We find ourselves in a period where we have to build bilateral relationships with our partners in the region. The work that we've done with Qatar has been so effective and moved so quickly that our building of a bilateral relationship with them has sort of lagged. And so we've got to tell the story about how this relationship makes the United States more prosperous and more secure. Al-Udeid Air Base being the greatest example of that. I will tell you a story. I was speaking to someone, an American citizen, who did not quite understand our relationship with Qatar and how it enhances U.S. security. And they suggested, in a question, why don't we just close Al-Udeid? And I said, look, let me explain something to you. When you're asleep in the United States, it's Al-Udeid Air Base that is keeping you secure. That air base, that cooperation, military cooperation, is a huge part of our global strategy for security. And so the misunderstanding we can live with, I think, but only if we're in a constant conversation about the importance of this relationship and what it means to the United States. Every country has its own parochial interests very often, and that's okay. And so we have to be able to describe why Qatar is important to the United States, but it is important also for us to realize that this mutual relationship is never out of balance and has not been out of balance for, I would say, at least a decade.
And of course, the big issue for a lot of Americans is Hamas, the fact that their political wing is based here. Texas A&M University, which has been here for a long time, is pulling out almost entirely by 2028 as a result of that. Without getting into Texas A&M, I mean, what are the misconceptions about Hamas's presence here in the, as it relates to some people in the United States?
Yeah. So this is a really important point. Had we been having this conversation 18 months ago, prior to October 7, I would be explaining to you that everything that has broken out in conflict since 2012 in Gaza, the reason that it went away, the reason it was mediated and solved, was because of Qatar's strong relationship with Israel and their relationship with Hamas, their hosting of Hamas here. And so it has been an effective implement for bringing peace and stability to Gaza. And even over the course of the last 18 months, it is because Qatar has maintained a relationship with Hamas, has hosted Hamas, that we were able to get into the ceasefire arrangements that we were able to get into. You know this as well as anyone. Foreign policy, international relations can be very tricky and very tough. There are people and organizations the United States is never going to engage with. It does not mean that those organizations don't need engagement in order to resolve conflict. In order to do that, we need a trusted partner, an honest broker to have those conversations. And in this regard, Qatar is that honest broker.
And without emphasizing anything you can't emphasize in a public forum, where do you think the negotiations stand with Hamas right now, particularly about the hostages?
Well, here's what I think is important. Anyone who's ever been involved in high-level international negotiations knows this. The worst thing that can happen is a cessation of the conversation and the negotiations. We find ourselves in a period of great activity with regard to negotiations. Egypt, Qatar, obviously the United States, Israel, and Hamas are in a cycle of conversation and trying to find a way forward. And so I would say that as long as the conversation is ongoing, there's an opportunity to find a way ahead. You've seen great energy from the administration with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. There have been periods of time over the last 18 months where the conversation stopped. Those were the most dangerous and I would say darkest times. But we find ourselves in a moment where every entity involved in these negotiations is trying to find a way, and that is at least optimistic and hopeful that we will coalesce around something.
There seems to be more and more public agreement that Hamas should disarm. Is that the case?
I think so, and I think that Hamas understands that. It's not a great negotiating position for them, but I don't think there's any air between any of the parties involved in negotiations about what the future of Hamas is, and it is to move on from their military activity and to disarm.
And what does the day after look like then, or is that impossible to tell?
Well, I would not say it's impossible to tell, but I would say that I think the day after looks like all of the region, the regional quint, the United States, European partners, doing all that they can to help support a Palestinian entity that can govern, that does not include Hamas leadership, but that make sure that Israel feels and has the security that they need, that the Palestinian people are able to go back to living their lives in relatively calm and peace, and that there are economic and social opportunities. That's the responsibility of all of us in the day after. Not to opine too much, but there have been periods of time prior to October 7 where the interests of folks in the region, folks in Europe, folks in the United States, the interest in the development and future of the Palestinian people was not top of mind. I don't think we can ever go back to that. In order to have a lasting peace, we have to be interested in the economic development, the social development, the peace and security, not just of Israel, but of the Palestinian people. In order to live side by side, there has to be a sense of peace and optimism everywhere.
Another tricky relationship the United States government has, of course, is with the Taliban, and the Qatari government has played a key role in, for instance, supporting the American university in Afghanistan here, continuing to educate Afghan women and men. The Taliban has not been recognized by any government. But what are the issues the United States is interested in? I mean, there's been consistently the Taliban have taken American citizens. We saw a recent release, and your embassy is sort of the de facto kind of way of dealing with the Taliban. What are the issues that that you're interested in talking about with the Taliban, and where you think there's any chance of success?
Well, I think there is a chance of success. It's incremental success. We are, as always, focused on counterterrorism. A country like Afghanistan, where the folks who are leading the country don't have control over all of the territory, is always going to be a concern for the United States. And so counterterrorism, counter narcotics, we're interested in the lives and health of Afghan citizens. And those are places where there are opportunities to work with our partners to bring about a turnaround in how those issues move forward. You note that the Taliban as a government has not been recognized, but we also can't turn a blind eye to a populace there that is still very much suffering under the Taliban. And so there are places where we can be cooperative with our partners. They include humanitarian assistance. They include education for women and girls. But as a priority, not allowing that country to devolve to be a platform for terror is the highest of priorities. But we also don't want them exporting a narcotics trade that imperils populations from Europe to the United States.
And the United States and other allied countries are sitting on billions of dollars in Afghan, I mean, it's really owned by the Afghan people. Is there any discussion about kind of what the disposition of those funds might be, or maybe the interest from those funds? Or is that frozen permanently for the moment?
So it's a great question. I'll note that I'm the U.S. ambassador to Qatar, and so I can't speak eloquently necessarily on those things, but I think that without some movement in Afghanistan toward more equitable administration of that country. Some of the issues that we mentioned, the counter-narcotics, counter-terrorism, that on the priority list of conversations to have, that releasing those funds isn't at the top of the list.
Okay. So obviously the Trump administration is potentially going to do some kind of nuclear deal. Qatar has very strong links to Iran, not least the huge natural gas field. You, while you were ambassador, saw Iran release American hostages as a result of Qatari negotiations. So can you reflect maybe in the few minutes we have left a little bit about how Qatar can be helpful in this, potentially rather promising moment with Iran?
Yeah. So let me push back just a little bit, just because I think words are important. Yeah. Qatar has an effective relationship with Iran. You said they have a strong relationship with Iran. Okay. We also talked about misunderstanding and misinformation. So I think it's important that people understand that it's an effective relationship. Someone will hear strong and then wonder sort of what the heart of that relationship is. For us, Qatar has been an effective partner and voice because of the relationship that they have with Iran, and a relationship that was really brought to the fore after 2017. We think that Qatar, just as they were in helping negotiate the release of detained Americans, will continue to be an important voice, both for our shared values and our shared goals in the region, but also as negotiations continue between the United States and Iran indirectly. We think that Qatar can be a value add to articulating some of the things that are most important to us. And so we think conversations so far have gone relatively well. We will see how they come to fruition, but I would say this about Qatar, and having been here 2.5 years, and having the current realization that this may be my last time to sit here as the U.S. ambassador, there is not anything that we do in the region that's not enhanced by our relationship with Qatar. It is, I think, axiomatic at this point that if the United States wants to sort of investigate whether we can be helpful and how to be helpful in Lebanon or in Gaza or in North Africa, we start with Qatar because it's a reliable relationship. And if we're going to build partners and partnerships, we know that the relationship that we have with Qatar will only enhance what it is we're trying to do. And so specifically on Iran, as we get to a place where there may be action or activity that's necessary, we know that our relationship with Qatar will only provide greater opportunity, greater swiftness and effectiveness to what we're doing.
Well, we want to thank Ambassador Davis. We know we're on a tight schedule. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.